The snow fell heavy across the endless plains, blanketing the land in silence, save for the howl of the winter wind. The settlers whispered that no one could survive out here once the frost set in, especially not a woman left alone. They said the storms were merciless, that the cold would seep into the bones and break even the strongest spirit. And when she was seen struggling to gather firewood outside the old, creaking cabin, they shook their heads and muttered that she would not make it through the winter. But then came the cowboy, a man whose life had been forged under the same skies, whose grit had been tested against both sun and storm. When he heard the talk, he narrowed his eyes and said firmly, "Not if I can help it." The woman, Eliza, had already lost much, her family taken by fever, her neighbors scattered by hardship, her home standing alone against the wilderness. Every morning she woke to frost on her blanket, breath rising like smoke in the dim light of dawn. Her hands were cracked from hauling water, her body weary from chopping wood with more willpower than strength. Yet even in her quiet determination, despair had begun to whisper its cruel lies. She had started to believe the voices that claimed she wouldn't last, that she was too fragile, too small for a winter this fierce. That's when the cowboy rode in. His horse was dark and strong, its hooves crunching against the frozen earth. He was a tall man with a rugged beard, eyes sharp as the horizon, and a voice steady as the ground beneath his boots. He didn't waste words with pity. Instead, he brought wood for her fire, mended the leaks in her roof, and taught her the rhythm of survival: when to hunt, how to lay traps, where to find water even beneath the ice. Day after day, he worked beside her, and with each passing sunrise, the cabin that once felt like a tomb began to breathe again with warmth and hope. Eliza found herself learning skills she never thought possible. Under the cowboy's guidance, she held a rifle steady and shot her first rabbit, her heart pounding with both fear and pride. He showed her how to stretch hides for warmth, how to smoke meat so it would last, how to listen to the wind as if it carried secrets about the land. Winter doesn't come to destroy you, he told her one night as they sat by the crackling fire, shadows dancing against the log walls. It comes to test you, and if you stand firm, you come out stronger than you ever imagined. There were nights when the wind screamed like a wild beast, rattling the shutters and shaking the door. Eliza would sit by the fire, clutching her blanket, and wonder if the voices outside had been right. But then the cowboy would place another log on the flames, tip his hat, and say with quiet certainty, "This cabin will hold, and so will you." His confidence was like an anchor, steadying her spirit when the storms tried to pull it under. Weeks turned to months. The snow piled high, the rivers froze, and still they endured. Eliza grew stronger. Her hands, once frail, became calloused. Her arms learned the rhythm of chopping wood, her eyes the patience of watching the horizon for game. She discovered within herself a resilience she never knew existed. The woman who once trembled at the thought of survival now stood beside the cowboy with her head high, facing the wilderness with unshaken resolve. The settlers who had doubted her came riding past one day. They expected to find the cabin abandoned, the woman gone, swallowed by the winter's cruelty. Instead, they saw smoke curling proudly from the chimney, saw the cowboy and Eliza hauling wood together, their movements sure and strong. They stopped, astonished, and one of them whispered, "She made it." The cowboy only gave a small smile and replied, "No, we made it." When spring finally broke, the snow melting into streams that sang through the valley, Eliza stood on the porch of her cabin and looked out over the land. The sky was vast, the air clean, and her heart full. She had survived the winter, not as a fragile woman clinging to life, but as a fighter, tempered by hardship and lifted by the hand of someone who refused to let her fall. The cowboy tipped his hat and said, "Told you so." And for the first time in a long while, Eliza laughed, not the laughter of relief, but the laughter of victory. Friends, this story is more than just about surviving the cold. It's about the power of courage, the strength found in unlikely partnerships, and the refusal to give in when the world says you can't. Like Eliza, we all face winters in our lives, times when the storm seems too harsh, the night too long, and the voices of doubt too loud. But remember, you are stronger than you think, and sometimes all it takes is a helping hand and a brave heart to rise above. If you felt inspired by this story, make sure to subscribe to this channel. For more powerful tales that remind you of resilience, courage, and hope, your support keeps these stories alive, and together, we'll face every storm and come out stronger. Spring had come to the valley, but for Eliza and the cowboy, the change of season was not the end of their struggle. It was the beginning of a new life. The snow that had once covered the land like a shroud now melted into green pastures, and streams flowed clear again. The settlers who once doubted her survival now began to look at Eliza differently. No longer was she the fragile woman clinging to a crumbling cabin. She was stronger, her eyes sharper, her movements more certain. Still, the scars of winter remained, etched not only on her hands but on her heart. The cowboy, who had stood by her through every storm, now spoke of rebuilding, of planting fields, of turning survival into living. He showed her how to till the soil, how to cast seeds into the earth with faith that tomorrow would bring growth. At first, her hands trembled. She had never dreamed of a life beyond mere endurance, but slowly she began to see the miracle of change. Each sprouting green shoot was a promise, each sunrise a sign that the worst was behind them. Yet even in the warmth of spring, challenges rose. The land was harsh, wild animals prowled at night, and there were whispers of raiders moving across the plains. Eliza sometimes felt the old fear creep back into her chest, but the cowboy's steady voice reminded her, "Fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've got something worth fighting for." And fight they did. Together, they built fences, hunted game, traded with passing caravans, and made the cabin not just a shelter, but a home. Slowly, a bond grew stronger between them, not just of survival, but of trust, loyalty, and something deeper that neither dared put into words. Eliza found herself watching him as he worked, his hands rough but capable, his eyes always scanning the horizon for danger, yet softening when they met hers. She knew then that he was more than a savior in winter. He was the reason she believed in life. Again. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in gold and crimson, they sat on the porch together. Silence stretched between them, but it was not the silence of loneliness, it was the silence of understanding. The cowboy finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "They said you wouldn't survive the winter, but look at you now. You've done more than survive. You've lived, you've fought, and you've risen." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of truth. She realized she was no longer the woman the settlers pitied. She was her own strength, her own hope, and the cowboy had helped her see it. The bond between them was no longer just about facing storms, it was about facing life, side by side. As days turned into weeks, travelers passing through the valley began to stop by their cabin for warmth, food, or guidance. They were welcomed, not by a lonely widow, but by a woman who had become a symbol of endurance. Stories spread of how she had braved the cruelest winter and lived, how a cowboy had refused to let her fall. People found inspiration in her strength, and soon the cabin became a place where hope was rekindled for all who passed. Eliza, once the woman who nearly gave in to despair, had become the voice that told others, "If I can survive, so can you." And the cowboy, always beside her, only smiled, knowing that he had kept his promise, not only to help her survive, but to help her find the life she was meant to live. Friends, this story is not just about the people in the wild frontier. It's a reflection of every struggle we face in our own lives. Sometimes, storms will test us, winters will try to break us, and voices of doubt will rise around us. But like Eliza, if we keep fighting, if we trust in the strength within us, and if we allow the right people to walk beside us, we will rise stronger than ever. No season, no storm, and no doubt can break a determined spirit. So remember, if this story inspired you, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more powerful tales of courage, resilience, and hope. Your support is what keeps these stories alive, and together we'll continue to face every season of life with unshaken strength.